Part 3 of The Watsons by Jane Austen. Do you suppose Miss Edwards inclined to like him? I'm afraid not. You know she is an only child and will have at least £10,000. But she may still like our brother. Oh no, the Edwards look much higher. Her father and mother would never consent to it. Sam is only a surgeon, you know. Sometimes I think she does like him, but Mary Edwards is rather prim and reserved. I do not always know what she would be at. Unless Sam feels on sure ground with the lady herself, it seems a pity to me that he should be encouraged to think of her at all. A young man must think of somebody, said Elizabeth, and why should not he be as lucky as Robert, who has got a good wife and £6,000? We must not all expect to be individually lucky, replied Emma. The luck of one member of the family is luck to all. Mine is all to come, I am sure, said Elizabeth, giving another sigh to the remembrance of Purvis. I have been unlucky enough, and I cannot say much for you, as my aunt married again so foolishly. Well, you will have a good ball, I dare say. The next turning will bring us to the turnpike. You may see the church tower over the hedge. And the White Hart is close by. I shall long to know what you think of Tom Musgrave. Excuse me. Such were the last audible sounds of Miss Watson's voice before they passed through the turnpike gate and entered on the pitching of the town, the jumbling and noise of which made farther conversation most thoroughly undesirable. The old mare trotted heavily on, wanting no direction of the reins to take the right turning, and making only one blunder in proposing to stop at the milliner's before she drew up to Mr. Edwards' door. Mr. Edwards lived in the best house in the street and the best house in the place, if Mr. Tomlinson, the banker, might be indulged in calling his newly erected house at the end of the town with the shrubbery and sweep in the country. Mr. Edwards's house was higher than most of its neighbours, with 2 windows on each side the door, the windows guarded by posts and chain, the door approached by a flight of stone steps. Here we are, said Elizabeth as the carriage ceased moving, safely arrived. And by the market clock we have been only 35 minutes coming, which I think is doing pretty well, though it would be nothing for Penelope. It is not a nice town. Is it not a nice town? The Edwards have a noble house, you see, and they live quite in style. The door will be opened by a man in livery with a powdered head, I can tell you. Emma had seen the Edwardses only one morning at Stanton. They were therefore all but strangers to her, and though her spirits were by no means insensible to the expected joys of the evening, she felt a little uncomfortable in the thought of all that was to precede them. Her conversation with Elizabeth, too, giving her some very unpleasant feelings with respect to her own family, had made her more open to disagreeable impressions from any other cause, and increased her sense of the awkwardness of rushing into intimacy on so slight an acquaintance. There was nothing in the manners of Mrs. or Miss Edwards to give immediate change to these ideas. The mother thought a very friendly woman had a reserved air. The mother, though a very friendly woman, had a reserved air, and a great deal of formal civility, and the daughter, a genteel-looking girl of 22 with her hair in papers, seemed very naturally to have caught something of the style of her mother, who had brought her up. Emma was soon left to know what they could be by Elizabeth's being obliged to hurry away, and some very, very languid remarks on the probable brilliancy of the ball were all that broke at intervals a silence of half an hour before they were joined by the master of the house. Mr. Edwards had a much easier and more communicative air than the ladies of the family. He was fresh from the street, and he came ready to tell whatever might interest. After a cordial reception of Emma, he turned to his daughter with, "Well, Mary, I bring you good news. The Osbornes will certainly be at the ball tonight. Horses for 2 carriages are ordered from the White Hart to be at Osborne Castle by 9. "I am glad of it," observed Mrs. Edwards, "because their coming gives a credit to our assemblies. The Osbornes, being known to have been at the first ball, will dispose a great many people to attend the second. It is more than they deserve, for in fact they add nothing to the pleasure of the evening. They come so late and go so early, but great people have always their charm." Mr. Edwards proceeded to relate every other little article of news which his morning's lounge had supplied him with, and they chatted with great briskness till Mrs. Edwards's moment for dressing arrived, and the young ladies were carefully recommended to lose no time. Emma was shown to a very comfortable apartment, and as soon as Mrs. Edwards's civilities could leave her to herself, the happy occupation, the first bliss of a ball, began. The girls, dressing in some measure together, grew unavoidably better acquainted. Emma found in Miss Edwards the show of good sense, a modest, unpretending mind, and a great wish of obliging. And when they returned to the parlour where Mrs. Edwards was sitting respectably attired in one of the 2 satin gowns which went through the winter, and a new cap from the milliner's, they entered it with much easier feelings and more natural smiles than they had taken away. Their dress was now to be examined. Mrs. Edwards acknowledged herself too old-fashioned to approve of every modern extravagance, however sanctioned, and though complacently viewing her daughter's good looks, would give but a qualified admiration. And Mr. Edwards, not less satisfied with Mary, paid some compliments of good-humoured gallantry to Emma at her expense. The discussion led to more intimate remarks, and Miss Edwards gently asked Emma if she were not often reckoned very like her youngest brother. Emma thought she could perceive a faint blush accompanying the question, and there seemed to be something still more suspicious in the manner to which Mr. Edwards took up the subject. "You are paying Miss Emma too great compliment, I think, Mary," said he hastily. "Mr. Sam Watson is a very good sort of young man, and I dare say a very clever surgeon, but his complexion has been rather too much exposed to all weathers to make a likeness to him very flattering." Mary apologised in some confusion. She had not thought a strong likeness at all incompatible with very different degrees of beauty. There might be a resemblance in countenance, and the complexion and even the features be very unlike. My apologies for this reading. End of part 3, to be continued in part 4.